people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. On the 28th of next month, former WBC light flyweight champion Kim Clavel will attempt to rebound off her first professional loss to fellow champion Jessica Neri Plata opposite the ring, Naomi Reyes.
What do we need to know?
Both fighters are in a similar place, more or less, in their careers. Kim's coming off the loss to Jessica Neri Plata, and Naomi's coming off the loss to Gabriela Fundoria.
Kim's 32, whereas Naomi's 28.
Both fighters are orthodox fighters, and tail of the tape, they're about evenly matched, the both of them.
She fights for WBC International light flyweight title. That means whoever wins the fight is one step closer to fighting for the full title. For the full WBC title, Jessica won.
Title she won from Kim Clavel. Naomi Reyes sports a professional record. 9 wins with 2 losses, no draws, 5 knockouts, having never been knocked out in 11 professional contests, 11 professional bouts. To Kim Clavel, who's got a few more fights than Naomi does, more rounds in the bank, sporting a professional record of 16 wins with 1 loss, no draws, 3 knockouts, having never been knocked out in 17 professional contests, 17 professional bouts. Kim's got more rounds in the bank, whereas Naomi, she's got more knockouts. I'd say the edge in power, it does have to go to Naomi.
To the eye, she does seem to have heavier hands than Kim. Kim's more of a slickster, more of a speedster.
Kim Clavel, who saw action two times last year, once in March, then again in July. She saw action earlier this year in January, her first loss.
That was the Jessica Neri Plata fight, the unification match between them.
Whereas Naomi wasn't as active the previous year or the year before it. She sat out all of 2021, only fought once in 2022. That was the Gabriela Fundora fight.
That breaks down to roughly 1 fight in 24 months. 1 fight in the last 2 years.
So because that fight was less than 12 months ago, Naomi won't have any ring rust to shake off. Naomi, she's a scrapper.
An aggressive one that sacrifices defense for offense when letting her hands go.
Previous instances, she has left herself open for left hooks and looping overhand rights.
Defense is leaky.
Now, offensively, she can give you some pushback. She can give you something to have to work around, but there are holes there, big ones.
Countering opportunities.
It's exactly what they are. And Kim Clavel, being a bit of a slickster, a speedster, she's fast enough and athletic enough to put punches in there and get out safely.
She has to.
Naomi Reyes being a scrapper, mid-range to inside fighter, an aggressive one. Kim's got to be careful not to sell out and spend too much time in there, too much time in the pocket. I do think Naomi has the heavier hands of the two.
Careful.
Spending too much time in the pocket, getting hit with hard shots. That cost Kim Clavel the Jessica Neri Plata fight. We'll see if she's learned her lesson.
Of many countering opportunities opposite the ring, Naomi Reyes, but she's got to be judicious.
To the eye, Kim may not have heavier hands than Naomi Reyes per se, but she does have the faster hands and the faster feet of the two. Kim is at her best playing at the angles, beating those feet.
Being elusive.
Naomi Reyes is strong and durable, and Kim, God bless her, she's not a knockout merchant, so I don't see a knockout. Kim's best bet, her best shot at victory.
Playing at the angles, working off the counter.
Her punches are shorter, tighter, somewhat more defensible than what you get from Naomi Reyes. I think this one goes to the cards. I think Kim Clavel wins a points decision.
So I think it's gonna go.
Naomi's not a bad fighter. She can give Kim Clavel some resistance. She can give her some pushback.
But I've got Kim on points. This fight's supposed to be for a WBC light flyweight title, vacant WBC light flyweight title, a step in the direction of a Jessica Neri Neri Plata rematch should Kim Clavel win.
I think she's going to, because Kim is going to be facing Naomi instead of Jessica, and because Jessica doesn't actually have a fight scheduled.
Did Team Clavel decide to forego the rematch?
To work on things and better prepare themselves for Jessica Neri Plata. Did they underestimate her the first time, and are they preparing to face her?
Seems that way. They're fighting for a version of a WBC title, and she is this division's WBC champion, ranked number 1 in the women's light flyweight division.
Perhaps it is their intention to run it back with Jessica Neri Plata, just not straight away.
Perhaps not.
Jessica's not Kim's only path to an alphabet title, you know. There are actually 2 champions, 2 unified champions at this weight. Jessica is one, and Evelyn Bermudez of Argentina, who's in possession of the WBO and IBF title.
She's the other.
I happen to think Evelyn is a little bit more beatable than Jessica Neri Plata is. Lest we forget, she dropped a decision 2 fights ago to Yo Costavalle, who moved up from minimum weight up to light flyweight, won those 2 alphabet titles, then vacated them.
Perhaps Kim can see about fighting her after the Naomi Reyes fight, provided she wins.
And I think she will. She could always elect to take on Evelyn Bermudez, see if she can't win those 2 alphabet titles, and if she does, then she can revisit that Jessica Neri Plata fight for all the marbles, all the belts.
Undisputed.
We'll see what happens. For now, she's set to be sharing the ring with Naomi Reyes very soon, next month on the 28th. Keep your eyes peeled for that.
At all, like, no man's way, like, yeah.
No.
Or you like it,
He's a good fighter, but I say to him, everybody say the same thing before I fought with Golovkin. Oh, he's a monster. He's gonna knock out Canelo. He's this and that. At the end of the day, it's not the same being in the ring with other fighters like being in the ring with me. It's different.
It sounds like you're starting to like the challenge, though. Like, it's starting to get the fire.
I like challenge, but I have a goal this year in my career, right? So, and it's a really hard fight for me, like the Bivol fight. But look, I like that kind of challenge.
He must, because it was never necessary to go to light heavyweight to begin with. That was a risk that many others dare not take, but Canelo Alvarez can safely say he's boxed at light heavyweight against light heavyweight champions at least 2 times, 2 more times than David Benavidez, who's a naturally bigger guy than Canelo.
He says that David Benavidez is good, but he's great, and I agree with him.
I suppose for some it all boils down to what you thought of Dimitri Bivol before that Canelo Alvarez fight. Perhaps there were those of you out there who might have viewed him as a safer choice than some others, but here on this channel, I told you many, many times, out of all these guys that are out there in the running for a Canelo Alvarez fight, or just guys that want one, guys like Jermall Charlo or Demetrius Andrade, David Benavidez.
All the guys who were in the running for a Canelo Alvarez fight, and some that still are. Out of all of those guys, the Dimitri Bivol fight is the most dangerous fight. That's the biggest potential banana skin. Not those guys. Those guys are basic.
They were basic. They still are basic. Who are we talking about? We're talking about a quasi-retired Charlo that hasn't boxed in close to 2 years. Who are we talking about? Demetrius Andrade, who's been sat on his back pocket more than once by lesser fighters than Canelo Alvarez. Sat on his back pocket by Vanez Martirosyan years ago.
Sat on his back pocket more recently by Desmond Nicholson.
He struggled with Jack Colquet years ago. He was actually rattled in the Liam Williams fight, late into that fight, years later.
These are the guys Canelo's critics love to hype up. These guys.
Their latest flavor of the month, David Benavidez, who couldn't seal the deal with an already exhausted Caleb Plant, who was doing little more than spoiling and clinching for about 5 rounds. He couldn't find the knockout.
This guy's a monster?
He's got a guy in front of him who is so obviously gassed, his legs are gone, he's ready to go, and he couldn't find the knockout.
This guy's a monster?
I've said it many times in many videos already. I'll say it here again that I would prefer that Canelo Alvarez take on David Benavidez in September instead of Dimitri Bivol. Canelo Alvarez himself, he's confirmed to reporters his plan is to rematch Dimitri Bivol in September, though insisted he is open to a David Benavidez fight if the Bivol fight doesn't happen.
And I was hoping it wouldn't. I was hoping that Dimitri Bivol would be preoccupied with the undisputed light heavyweight championship of the world.
What I was hoping was that sometime this summer we would see Dimitri Bivol versus Artur Beterbiev for more reasons than one. That doesn't look to be the case.
On the premise that depending when a Dimitri Bivol versus Artur Beterbiev fight would have happened, Dimitri may not have been available for a Canelo Alvarez fight in September, so Canelo would then be able to perhaps take on somebody else, somebody like David.
We have a contract for 3 fights. We have Bivol, Andrade, we have Charlo, we have David Morrell. You know, if everything goes well, then I'm pretty sure it's going to go well. So I wouldn't sign that a contract for 168 if I didn't think he was going to do 168.
I guess if it doesn't happen this year, what's the plan? I saw a thing that that there's already a fight potentially brewing with Morrell. Is that accurate?
Right now, like I said, you know, we already have a contract for 3 fights. And that fight was Caleb Plant, David Morrell, Boo, and a possibility with Charlo.
It's further confirmation from David Benavidez' own father of what we talked about here on the channel, that David Benavidez' next fight is already booked, and it has been booked since before the Caleb Plant fight this past weekend. Approximately 13 or 14 days ago, Samson Lukowicz spoke with Sportbox TV official and imparted to them word that the David Morrell fight is already a done deal, and this was ahead of the Caleb Plant fight.
It was several days before the Caleb Plant fight. So if David Benavidez is already spoken for, already booked, and already under contract, why are Team Benavidez claiming that Canelo's running from them?
It's because they're a bunch of shysters, that's why.
That's it.
Canelo's recent comments about being open to a David Benavidez fight in September, provided that he can't do the Bivol fight.
Needs to be said that Team Benavidez want to pull a fast one on everybody. They want to convince you that Canelo Alvarez is running from them by taking on an unbeaten champion at a higher weight in his prime for a second time, who already beat Canelo once before.
They want to convince you that Canelo is running from David by fighting Dimitri, as if David is the same caliber of fighter as Dimitri.
And while they are trying to convince me and you of this, they're booking him fights with other people.
I don't actually see anything wrong with keeping the fighter busy. I encourage them to keep their fighter busy. I encourage them to do that, but they don't have to lie about it. Canelo's not running from you.
He never was.
That's just the narrative you're pushing to sell David Benavidez' fights.
Another plastic boogeyman.
Got no problem with those 3 fights for David. I like those 3 fights for David, but you'll notice that David Benavidez' father said that his son is currently under contract. What is a 3-fight deal? And if he's under a 3-fight deal, what you then have to ask is if Canelo doubled back and he decided he's not going to fight Dimitri in September, he wants David.
Is that going to be a problem?
You guys that love mentioning Canelo Alvarez and name-dropping him in videos, saying that he's running from your son, if he decided to fight him instead in September,
Is that going to be a problem?
are you going to try to make this a sides of the street thing? You know, if Canelo Alvarez were to do this, DAZN and Matchroom, they'd want the fight. They'd make a play for it, as would the PBC.
So before you entered into that 3-fight deal with the PBC very recently, you knew what side of the street Canelo was on.
You didn't go over there. The same way that Errol Spence Jr.'s fans have been telling Terrence Crawford to cross the street all these years. You didn't cross the street for Canelo.
Whatever.
And if Canelo expected you to, if he told you that he wants to fight you, but it's got to be on Matchroom, it's got to be on DAZN.
Is that going to be a problem?
Didn't forget that Canelo Alvarez had to approach Caleb Plant 3 times, 3 separate times. I didn't forget that the first champion at super middleweight that he approached for a fight was Caleb Plant. In so many words, Caleb kept putting it off.
Yep.
He wanted to be saved for last.
And when he was last, after Canelo beat Callum and he beat Billy,
Goes back to Caleb, and they turn it into a sides of the street kind of deal. A sides of the street kind of situation, that the fight don't happen unless it happens on Showtime.
fair enough.
Caleb Plant being a champion, being in possession of the last puzzle piece at 168 pounds to crown an undisputed champion. Canelo did what he had to do for that last brass ring, but David's no champion. He's just a mandatory. He's just a mandatory challenger. Like John Ryder's a mandatory challenger. We're going to get into a haggling situation over this thing. What are the David Benavidez people going to want for a Canelo Alvarez fight? Are they going to want more than Caleb got? Caleb got approximately 10 mil for that fight.
As a champion.
Based on what Canelo Alvarez said, that if things don't work out with Dimitri, he's open to a fight with David in September. You've got to ask these questions.
Get ahead of this thing, you do, and how they might play it.
Do they really want a Canelo Alvarez fight, or are they just trying to use his name to sell David's fights? Is it a fight that they're after?
Is it really? Or is it just publicity?
If push comes to shove, and Canelo says he wants David in September, are you going to give him a hard time about it? Or are you going to do what you're supposed to do and fight on his terms, the same way that Mayweather fought under Oscar's terms?
And Canelo fought under his.
What's this really about? Is this really about proving that David Benavidez is a better fighter in the ring than Canelo Alvarez? Or is this about using the legacy and the name and the marquee value that Canelo Alvarez has already built as a marketing tool for your fighter?
You see a lot of weaknesses in Benavidez, seeing that fight against Plant?
He's a good fighter. But look, I'm a great fighter.
Legendary.
This rising tide of David Benavidez supporters, David Benavidez fans, not all of them talk down Canelo and talk up David for love of David. They do it for love of Al Heyman, his PBC, his assembly line of manufactured boogeymen whose careers pale in comparison to Canelo. Understand that if you go into a boxing conversation with these people, you're not conversing about boxing at all.
They want Canelo Alvarez to go into a multi-fight deal with the PBC, fight all of their fighters, and bail Showtime out.
So that even if Canelo Alvarez beats those guys, and I think that he would, I think he'd beat Jermall Charlo, I think he'd beat Demetrius Andrade, I think he beats David Benavidez, though even if he did, if he is in business with Al, they can always rest their laurels on that.
But at least Al would be promoting the biggest shows in that scenario because Canelo is the biggest name in this part of the world.
The biggest name in boxing. They resent him for it. They can't really call Errol Spence Jr. or Gervonta Davis the face of boxing so long as Canelo Alvarez is still around.
Of course not. He outsold Errol Spence Jr. in his own town.
The AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas, opposite the ring Billy Joe Saunders. Canelo Alvarez broke the indoor attendance record in America, not Errol Spence Jr.
So how the fuck is he the face of boxing? How's Gervonta?
He seems to think he's the face of boxing ahead of his upcoming fight with Ryan Garcia. In that fight might actually do some numbers with some help from Ryan, because if you go back to fighting Hector Garcias and Isaac Cruz's, you're back down to where you belong.
We know what your buys normally look like.
Because you've been on pay-per-view 5 times, and you've yet to crack 300,000 buys. If you do so this time, we'll know it was Ryan that made the difference. We'll know it was due to Ryan participating in the show, not just you. You by yourself, you don't put up those kinds of numbers.
Canelo Alvarez does.
And they hate him for it. They hate him because they can't control him the way some other fighters can be controlled. You can't even pretend that these guys have the following that he has.
They get it chubby over any unbeaten fighter Al Heyman has in his stable.
Start talking these guys up like they're the greatest thing since sliced bread, only for David Benavidez to go out there with an already gassed out Caleb Plant and fail to find the knockout.
And for what was it, 5 rounds?
Not even telling you that David isn't a capable fighter. He is a capable fighter. He's a good fighter, just good. But Canelo is great, and whatever he's doing now at this point in his career, it's just a bonus round. It's just extra credit. If he decided to retire here today,
he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. What's Demetrius Andrade? What's Jermall Charlo?
These guys at Canelo Alvarez's critics like to talk up while they talk him down. What's David Benavidez?
He's a Hall of Famer.
He's good, but he's not great.
This stuff you've been seeing as of late, this rising tide, it's not all for love of David.
It's for the love of Al Heyman and all of his faded glory. He's yet to produce another Mayweather.
Manufacture one, since he's supposed to be the wizard behind Floyd's success. Well, you could have fooled me.
He's yet to produce another.